Welcome back to Sika Strength and welcome back to Sikistan. Today on the Technique Sunday, we are doing Kakhiashvili, the athlete who competed for Greece. He is one of the greatest weightlifters ever. Multiple Olympic gold medals, multiple world records, multiple world championships, multiple European championships. Kakhi has one of the highest Sinclair clean and jerks ever. He clean and jerked 235 kilos at 90 kilos body weight. He is quite simply an amazing lifter. If you don't know who he is, you need to go look for him. You need to go and look at all those videos. Now today we're doing Kakhi's clean. I know we did cleans last week. We did Clarence Kennedy's clean last week, but someone suggested I do Kakhi, and to be honest, I just couldn't pass up doing Kakhi's clean in particular because in my opinion, it is his best lift in terms of technique. And we're going to cover two things that we actually haven't covered yet in this series, and that is the start position of the clean and the catch position of the clean, both of which Kakhi does amazingly well. Now, footage today, of course, Kakhi being active in the 80s and 90s is limited. It's VHS quality, so you do have to bear with me, but we can still see it. A lot of this is coming from Weightlifting News Agent, so shout out to Weightlifting News Agent. Please go check out his channel. Loads of vintage weightlifting stuff there, and a lot of this footage wouldn't be online and we wouldn't be able to see it if it wasn't for him. Now, the first place we need to start when we look at a start position, no pun intended, is the back position. And I know you're probably thinking, Owen, you keep talking about the back position, and that should let you know just how important that back position is. Now, in the start position of the clean, if we pause here on this 217.5 kilo clean, there's a couple of things we really need to focus on, and the back position is one of the most important parts of that. So in recent years, if you've been au fait with the general fitness industry and deadlifting, there's been a lot of arguments going around about a neutral back and going around about a flat back and maybe even deadlifting with a slightly flexed back. Maybe that might be an idea for some people. We don't particularly love that. But in weightlifting, it's very much actively a bad idea if you don't have as much extension as you can maintain in your back from the start position. And I can give you a very good reason for this. And essentially really fucks up our extension. It limits our extension really well. It is a very poor position to be in. If our upper back or lower back is rounded, our ability to fully extend and powerfully extend our legs in that third pull and turnover is very, very limited. You can practice this right now. Pretend to do an extension of a snatch or a clean, and I want you to try with a rounded back as much as possible and keep that back relaxed or rounded. You don't even have to force that extension in your upper back or lower back, and then try and extend your hips aggressively and fully. You'll find obviously quite quickly that you can't do that. Now try that with a fully extended back, a really arched upper back, a really tense and arched lower back, and then extend. You'll see how much more powerful that is. And our view and our goal when we're weightlifting in both the snatch and in the clean is an arched upper and lower back. Now, this will visually appear very different from lifter to lifter. Now, the reason I liked Kakhi and his clean in particular is we see a lot of extension in his back. He's incredibly mobile. He has a lot of range of motion in him, specifically his thoracic back and down through that mid back and lower. You'll see he's a lot of extension available to him in those positions. And when we look at the start position here, we'll see a really nice curvature. So if we go to a side on view here, and we'll see him start in a relaxed position, you'll see how relaxed, how rounded his back is and how he moves into this super tense position. Now, one of the benefits of this position is that as we're pulling in this really extended position, we can maintain those positions really well, much better than we could in a rounded or a flat back, or at least that's the case for most people. How this will look for you will be quite different. For some people, we'll see a huge amount of extension. For other people, it'll look like you basically have a flat back, but your aim is to extend your back as much as your mobility and anatomy will allow for you to get there, because it's so important for moving from our first pull, through our first pull to second pull, into that second pull, and then into that violent extension. So it's super important that we maintain those positions because it gives us the best opportunity as the pulls go on. If we move to a different video here, again in the 93, we'll see him starting in the start position. We'll see normal flat back here, relaxed, all G, and then he moves into this really extended position. You'll see how much those muscles tense. We'll see how rigid they are, and you'll see this a common theme throughout this series, how important the back position is. If you can get that much extension in your back and maintain it, that's fantastic. But usually when it comes to 90 plus kilo males, we don't see a lot of extension available to them, but the intention behind that is what we're aiming for. Usually we see, the extension of a 50 kilo female is what we're looking for. In the clean, you'll have more extension because you will be in a slightly higher position. So it will be less demanding on your hip mobility, your hamstrings and your glutes. You'll be able to, with that closer grip, have more extension in your back. And I promise you, it's one of the really important parts of your clean for a variety of reasons. But it's also very important for the second thing we're looking at here today, and that is Kakhi's catch position. So if we go into that catch position here in Kakhi, we'll see that he's in an incredibly upright position. He's full grip on the barbell, holding the hook grip. He's really proud in this position. His hips are slightly behind his heels, so he's not trying to get hips as forward as possible. He's still keeping those hips relatively behind. And you'll see that that back position is still kept incredibly strong. Even at these gargantuan clean, this 235 kilo clean, you'll see he only loses his position a little bit as he gets above parallel. This absolutely monstrous clean. But if we look at a 200 kilo clean and jerk here, we'll see how well he maintains that. Again, if we look at something like 195 here, you'll see him flat back, goes into extension, then he hits the bottom position, and hopefully you can see how well that lower back maintains that position. The really important part of these two different aspects, or these two different cues that we're looking for, is that the start position plays into the second position. If our back is relaxed of our lower back, we're going to have this curvature in our hip. This is going to put our hips further under towards our heels, which isn't always the best thing in the clean, because it's very hard to catch a sufficient bounce if we've relaxed that lower back too much. You'll see the integrity of his lower back. You may remind you of Liu Xiaojun. If we watch this 217 kilo and a half kilo clean here, we'll see the extension he maintains is immaculate. Obviously, he doesn't maintain the exact same extension in his lower back in the catch position, but the extension he maintains helps keep those hips back just a little bit. We don't want those hips all the way forward in the clean. We want them slightly back, ever so slightly. This allows us for a slightly better rack position. If our lower back is curved underneath our body, if it's slightly in between our heels too far, it's very hard to keep this proud rack position that we see Kakhi keeping here. But if we keep this curvature in our back in the start and this tension, really important, not only is the curvature, but the actual contraction of those muscles as we're pulling through, you can only keep that in the catch, or it's much easier to have in the catch position, is if you start the lift with this level of extension, this level of contraction. It's very hard to start in a relaxed position. Maybe you're in a flexed upper back, but you've also a bit of tension in there. And then to recover into an extended position in the catch position is so much harder, especially as cleans get heavier, is if you don't start that way. So we need to hit this position before we start the pull. So when we get to the catch position, we're putting ourselves in the best opportunity by setting ourselves up for success incredibly well by starting the lift in the right position we want to be in. One of the other reasons we want this strong lower back position, if we watch this 235 again, absolutely amazing, is that if our hips stay slightly further back, it's actually a bit easier to catch the bounce position. So if we put a little marker on your hip and we got a bar pad of your hip joint moving through a relaxed lower back clean, and we move through a position where your lower back isn't in a great position, you would see that your hips move really far forward, and then to reverse this direction, we have a longer path to move through. Whereas if we move through a position where we've kept this curvature in our lower back, it moves in a slightly straighter direction. And as a result, catching the bounce in the clean becomes a little bit easier. For some people, if you have a lot of room, if you've longer legs, you'll see this distance being pretty large. And if you're really mobile and you've longer legs, you'll see that this distance makes it much harder for you to catch the bounce. So if you're struggling to catch your bounce, of course, you need to look at your foot position, your bar timing, but also look at your lower back position and your upper back position. Look at that from the start position to the catch, and look at that then as you move into that catch position. Is your lower back staying in a quite extended position, as extended as you can keep it at the bottom of a squat with a barbell on your chest? And then is this keeping your hips back in a decent position? It doesn't have to be a massive change. Remember, in weightlifting, we're not always looking for huge, massive, diverse changes, massively visual changes. Millimeters or centimeters of change can make all the difference in the quality of the lift in weightlifting. And you'll see here in this 217 how integrally well he keeps that lower back in that position, and this allows him then to catch these bounces quite well. And you'll see then he managed to catch the bounce at that 235 kilos. So he starts the lift with a strong position, and then he catches this. Again, if we move to the upper back in the catch position, if we're not keeping that upper back in a strong position from the pull, it's going to be so much harder for you to keep that upper back position in the catch position. You'll see there from the side angle how well he catches that bounce. and how high his elbows stay. So if you find your elbows are dropping a lot, if you find like the barbell's crashing on you a lot, if you find like you have to really shuffle that barbell up your chest when you stand up, there's a good chance your upper back is collapsing. So keeping that position from the start, both in the upper and the lower back, allows us to catch a bounce better, maintain this rack position, the shelf for the barbell. If we keep that upper back in a really good position as we stand up, then you'll be giving yourself the best opportunity to have the best clean. Now, on to the second part of our series, like we always do. How do we implement this and fix this? Well, unfortunately, we normally look at some videos of these athletes training, but we don't have a lot of videos of Kakhi training. I've been fortunate enough to see Kakhi's program from his coach, but his and Pierce's coach when they were training. And the program, it's quite interesting. You can go look at that video. It's very easy to find on our channel. It's about the Greek national team's program. And it is very, very interesting in regards to it being quite similar of the time. It is a Bulgarian-esque program, and it's a brute force way of achieving these strong positions. Now, there's other implications from that, of course. PEDs are very likely involved. And so we brute force this through training. And I don't really want to, make that section of the video all about this. But they didn't have a huge variety of assistance exercises that we saw. Now, they may have done different aspects. Kakhi is, of course, an incredibly talented individual. And so we see this through some pulls, but what we do see this mostly, this back position being trained, is obviously from a high variety of lifts or a high volume of lifts, but also through a lot of front squatting. Now, front squatting in weightlifting commonly is thought of as a very strong leg strength movement, but it's actually not the prime driver of leg strength. Back squat is the best driver of leg strength in weightlifting. If you want the strongest legs for weightlifting, back squat is far better. It's less fatiguing. You can move heavier weights for more reps in a less fatiguing manner, and you can do it more consistently and more frequently throughout the week. Front squatting, lighter weights require greater postural demands, which in this case is one of the benefits for why the Greek team at the time did a lot of front squatting, and as a result of that, these postural muscles are trained incredibly well. Now, we see little videos of doing a little bit of assistance exercises, but by all accounts, it wasn't a huge amount of assistance work. So a lot of that postural muscles were trained through some pulls, through lots of lifting, and through a huge amount of high frequency of front squatting. So if you imagine you're in a position where you're Kakhi, and he was a notoriously good squatter. We think he's at least squatted 320, but I think it's more. I would like to get some definitive numbers on that, but he was allegedly supposed to have some huge squats. So if you imagine Kakhi is squatting 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, maybe twice a day some days. If he's front squatting 240, 250 kilos for multiple singles or multiple doubles for multiple sessions throughout that week, for multiple weeks on end, for multiple blocks on end, for multiple years on end, you can imagine the supporting muscles for that lower back in an individual who already has very good mobility and who can maintain that extension, is training that isometric position incredibly well. You can imagine how that upper back and that lower back are going to be trained fantastically through this brute force addition. Now, this isn't very viable for you. Well, it might be if you're willing to do what needs to be done, but in most cases, you're going to need to be looking at things like we've covered before: lower back extensions, pulls, different variety of pulls. Pulls are great because we can shift the loading into fatigue onto different exercises, snatch grip deadlifts, clean grip deadlifts, RDLs. A famous Nico Vlad was a big fan of these, allegedly invented Romanian deadlifts. They weren't for his hamstrings. They were originally invented for his lower back to mimic the at-the-knee position at the clean. We've got pulls, horizontal pulls, pull-ups, weighted pull-ups, 45-degree back extensions, prone back extensions. We've got a whole host of assistance exercises along with sufficient mobility. Now, a lot of times, we often forget about how much mobility we need to maintain this extension or get a few extra degrees of extension in our upper back and our lower back in weightlifting. We think of our rack position, we think of our overhead position, our ankles, our hips, but we often forget about the related musculature that we need for these positions. And this comes down to thoracic mobility, lats, external rotators, glutes, and hamstrings are frequently areas that restrict this movement. If you think about glutes and hamstrings being shortened and inability to lengthen at the bottom of the squat, they're probably going to pull that ass in a little bit and not allow you to extend as much as possible. Now, they mightn't feel necessarily tight unless you go investigating them, so I'd highly recommend you looking at your mobility to improve these positions on top of strengthening them. If you strengthen and mobilize, You'll see how supremely mobile Kakhi is in these videos. You'll see how deep he is in the catch position. You'll see how strong he is in these catch positions, how mobile he is in the rack position, how easily that barbell goes overhead, and the extension he maintains in the catch of his power jerks. You'll see that he has that mobility and that strength. Now, we don't know much about their mobility training. They probably got a lot of soft tissue work done, as most teams would and have done. So that is pretty useful in that aspect. So a lot of thoracic mobility. If you don't have a physio or annual therapists to help you, you can get one of those peanuts, put that in your lower back, moving through extension and flexion, see if you can free that up just a few extra degrees. You would not believe how much better it feels for your lifting if you have a few more degrees of range of motion to maintain it in that catch position. So catch position, start position, strong back is the biggest part of that, and that's one of the most important parts we're lifting. We'll get to other areas, but I do want to harp on the most important things and the things I see being the biggest issues. So mobilize, strength, actively chase those positions while you're pulling, chase those positions while you're catching. See if you're missing cleans, and so look at your upper and lower back in the pull and in the catch and see if that isn't part of the problem why your cleans are sucking right now. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you're enjoying this series. If there's someone you'd like to see, please do let me know in the comments below. Kakhi was actually a suggestion from last week, and it was too good an opportunity to pass up to see what we could find from Kakhi.